Hey guys, Justin here. Before you hang up the phone, this is the episode you don't want to listen to, but you need to listen to. This is an episode we had with the financial physio, Will Butler. And for so many of you guys out there, all of us that have the reality of going to school, going to grad school, having loans, and then getting into practice and opening a business, this is the episode you need to listen to. I was so excited to get Will on here. As you'll hear his background, he is a trained physical therapist and now is a financial coach, financial advisor, works in the finance space. The questions that I get often from students, from practicing docs, include ones on how to pay student loans, what happens when I open a business, should I open a business, what happens when the forgiveness period, all of these things in our life and our practice that we try to avoid, but it's the reality. And so when you graduate chiropractic school and you start your life and career, you can't avoid this. And the problem that most have is that they avoid the finances, they avoid the loans, they avoid the debt, they avoid the interest, they avoid what has to happen when they open a business. And for me, it's always the opposite. Let's talk about the things that frustrate us most. Let's talk about the things that we're most nervous about. Let's talk about things that give us anxiety so that we can have a plan and help work around and solve it. And for me, it's always about bringing on people, experts in their field that know more about it than I do. So we got questions in our student group last time we ran our Everything You Should Have Learned in Chiro School But Didn't course about student loan repayment plans. And my advice was that I don't know the answer, so find someone that does. So I went out and followed my own advice and found someone who does. So Will Butler's on the pod. The nice thing about him, as you'll hear, is he's not just like he doesn't have the brain of like a staff clinician or someone that doesn't get it. He gets it. I think for me, that's the most important part of this, is that he understands the reality of not only having the student loans, but also of being a business owner. And so it's not so black and white as, oh yeah, just do this or do that repayment plan. It's like, all right, let's consider all of the facts and all of your different options with the idea that we're going to try to create a financial future for ourselves and our families. And so this episode is a little different. It's a little bit of a detour from our normal episodes, but it might be one of the most important ones you listen to, because I think that if we have a good plan around it, it's going to decrease anxiety around all the things that make us nervous and an unknown. And with what's happened, in the government and all the changes and the deferrals and the repayment plans, there's a lot of changes that have happened. So we talk about that. And again, it's just about listening to people who are in it and know it more than we do. And Will knows more about this than I do. I think you'll enjoy this episode. Hey, if you're out there and you haven't got on our wait list yet, we have a few spots left on our Everything You Should Have Learned About Chiro School But Didn't wait list. Please make sure that you shoot me a message or fill out the form in the comments below. And I'll talk to you soon. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Business School for the Rehab Chiropractor. Class is officially in session. My name is Justin Rabinowitz, and I am a rehab chiropractor on a mission to teach you, a fellow rehab chiropractor, the exact tools and systems I've used to build my own successful rehab chiropractic practice so you can do the same. I hope you enjoy, and please subscribe. All right, well, we have a good thing going with the podcast, but I'm afraid of this one because no one likes talking about money, but that's why you're here. That's actually, and in all seriousness, this is something that I've always really wanted to do on the podcast within my own team and organization, something that I preach in my coaching. There's a lot of rehab chiros and doctors in general, which to my dismay, they just are afraid of numbers. They don't like money, and they think their business and personal life are separate. And what I try to coach my team and my mentorship clients on is that it all sort of works together. You can't have one without the other. And so I'm honored to have you here, especially with your background as a PT and then in the financial services industry. So you understand us. So you totally understand us. There's probably nobody more qualified to speak on this than you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the invitation to talk to your audience.
Excellent. So let's get right into it. Right, I am doing a student mentorship program. This is our second iteration, is coming up November 1st, and a question I get all the time is, "Hey, I'm graduating school in December. I'm thinking about when I graduate,
what the heck do I do with my student loans? And the answer that I had for them when they asked me the question last time is, I don't know. This isn't what I do. This is what you do. So let's go at it.
Yeah, I think, no, and I'm glad that you're talking about it because I think it's important. One of the things that I've thought about a lot over the years, I kind of think I simplify things down into metaphor and story in my own head to kind of help the dialogue keep going. And so one of the things that I see when I meet people similar to the situation that you are is that they get nervous and apprehensive to get into their business or go after what they really want to do because of debt. And the comparison that I think about, have you ever heard of slacklining?
Yes, but I'm not a slackliner.
Yeah. So like with slacklining, it's at a height that it's set where if you fall off, it's not that big of a deal. Well, as time progresses, think of it as raising that attachment point to the ground. Or as you get older, as you bring on a mortgage, as you have kids, as life becomes more complicated and your responsibility more significant, that slack line, which is okay to fall from, becomes a tightrope. And there's a lot more at stake should you fall. So my recommendation to people who want to be entrepreneurial is step on the slack line and get comfortable, because the same skills to operate 2 feet off the ground are the same skills required to operate 20 feet off the ground. Just the consequences a lot less. So it's like fail early, fail often, fail forward, meaning try and make effort. So coming back to your question as it relates to the student debt, they're so apprehensive because I have this debt. Well, especially if it's federal debt, if you go to start a business, you send them a letter saying, hey, I don't have an income. Well, if your payment is based upon a percentage of your income and you have no income, what's your payment? Zero. You just solved that problem. Now, in the short term, you have no payment. You need to understand the consequence. And the consequence long term is, at least as it currently stands, the debt slowly grows because you're not paying interest and principal. But man, a successful business can generate you so much income that your debt confusion, your student debt problem is no longer a problem. Now it's optional. How fast do you want to pay it off? What way do you want to pay it off? And it's just a lot less stress. So going back to it and simplifying it, the too long didn't read is I think you should, out of school, if you think you're going to start a practice or you want to get into mentorship, I think what you should do is go into an income-driven repayment plan, which if your debt is all federal, it's going to decrease it, number one. Number two, get after your business, create a plan, meet with a mentor like yourself, strategize, and attack.
Got it. And now, what if someone's graduating and they have to decide between income-based and different terms and they're maybe go work as an associate? Does it change?
I would still say the same thing. I think as you're getting established and you're developing professional skill, I don't think you should put yourself in a position where you have a significant debt obligation, meaning payment obligation. So like you can get onto these income-driven repayment plans, and what it does is it just creates a very low floor of what you have to pay. Mm-hmm. And I think it takes a lot of stress off of you and you have less guilt and that pressure, which then the argument is, well, is the pressure going to motivate you to work harder? I don't know. It's individual. You and I have just seen clinically that in general, when people get overstressed, they fail. So I kind of like to just slowly add the stressors back in, if that makes sense.
I get it. That does make sense. So then I guess fast forward, because what I've heard with income-based is after a certain period of time when it is forgiven after 25 years that you have to pay the difference in the amount forgiven in taxes. Is that true?
Yeah, great question. So as it currently stands, that's one of the things that's important to note. As of the day that we're recording this, no official changes have happened to any of the income-driven repayment plans. But as it currently stands and as it's written, any accumulated unpaid interest and principal that have accumulated over the 20 to 25 years, whatever repayment program you're on, whatever's left and gets wiped out, think of that as the Department of Education says, hey, Justin, you did it. You made this minimum payment. You fulfilled your obligation. You're done on our end. Well, then what does the IRS do? They look at it and they might say, well, on your balance sheet to us, you just had $400,000 of debt wiped out. That's a taxable event because it's like you got paid $400,000. And so it's good to know that, and it's good to bring that up and to be aware of that because you're giving yourself a 20, 25-year runway to save that money. That might not be part of your savings plan right out of school, especially if you're an associate, but that might be something like very quickly you're like, I need to make more money because I need to start saving for this very deliberate goal in the future. So that's as things currently stand. Current administration and probably administrations to come are going to try to re-engineer certain elements of the income-driven repayment system to where you might not have that taxable event. Or if you do, it wouldn't be nearly as substantial as it currently is.
Gotcha. And so as it currently stands, if I called you today and say, hey, what do I do? I'm doing well the business. I'm doing my income-based repayments. Do you suggest me take how a couple $100s a month and put it into like an IRA account? Like, how do you even do that?
Yeah. How do you save for that taxable event? Well, there are different vehicles that you can use, just like modalities in a clinic, to solve a problem. Traditionally, the advice would be, and I would agree with it, don't borrow against retirement specific accounts because there could be some taxable consequences related to it. Instead, that money can get placed in other interest bearing vehicles. And other vehicles could be a lot of different ways to invest. Some people are totally risk adverse and they just want to put it under a rock and just save the absolute dollar amount. Fine. Some people will put it into something called a brokerage account, which is a non-retirement investment account or a non-qualified account where you're able to grow money and access it without penalty because you've been paying taxes this whole way. And other people will use things like insurance vehicles where they'll grow cash within these permanent insurance policies, pull the cash out in 20, 25 years and not have the same tax penalties. Other people will use that money, buy a piece of real estate with the goal of selling that real estate in 20, 25 years. There's a lot of different ways to create the liquidity needed at that time. The most important thing is, I think, to keep it on your radar and not just haphazardly go through life like, oh yeah, this will go away. At least until the government says, hey, you don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a lot to think about with so many other issues happening in their lives and our lives with opening a business and doing all the things necessary for that. And now you're trying to pay down loans and now you have to worry about this other thing of what happens in 25 years, which no one wants to think about until that happens. And then they really have to think about it. And so it's a good thing to talk about, right?
No, I think it is. And it's just like in rehab scene, it's never one repetition that returns somebody to sport. It's a series of repetitions. And so just being aware of it and using it in conversation. And I actually think it's a nice question when you're looking for a financial professional to work with. If that's something that like, hey, how would you advise that I service my debt? How do you think I should plan for this? And if they don't have good answers, I think that's a great flag of like, you say you work with medical professionals. It's very apparent to me that you do not, because this is something we deal with.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go one step further now and talk about investing. Mm-hmm. And again, I like the thing I preach in my mastermind group is always think 1 to 2 steps ahead of where you currently are, because I think so many people, they get their business going, they get it off the ground, and they just can't see the next day. Just get to the next day. Mm-hmm. And I always want to sort of let them see, all right, but let's assume that this does work. Now what? And so let's assume that your business is doing well and it is working and you are able to pay your bills and pay your debt and all of that. And now you have a little bit of extra money. The problem that I've seen among entrepreneurs is something that I think about all the time is taking, mom and dad's advice who worked in corporate America for 30 years on as much as you can into retirement and do all of that, which is something that I did 7 or 8 years ago until I sort of understand it. The idea of, okay, I have money and where am I going to invest? Now, you know me because you've seen my stuff, like invest in yourself, invest in your business, invest in business skills, invest in business growth. But the caveat I always put in there is I also put into retirement vehicles, but figuring out how much, where, and what is always a challenge. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think the big thing is having the conversations, kind of like what you're talking about, thinking 1 to 2 steps ahead. I think the example in this, as it relates to finances, if you're in a relationship, talk and develop those conversations with your spouse or your partner. Figure out what is it that you value and are your values in alignment? Because if they are, then that gets you one step closer to maybe where the next dollar should go. So I think that's an important conversation to have. I think the other thing is to figure out is invest in yourself and your business until you're creating, I think, the financial stability you want. And then also you're creating the income that you want. Because sometimes the plans and the things we decide when we're not as cash flow positive as we would like to be puts us in situations where maybe we do something compromising. Or maybe even this, maybe it's like wasted reps.
Right.
You know, there's sometimes when you see people exercising in the gym and that person's been lifting the same weight for years. And is it better than doing nothing? Sure. I'm not going to argue that. But at the same time, is it purposeful? And I think when it comes to the retirement and contributing to it, speaking of corporate America, one of the things that I see with young entrepreneurs, especially healthcare entrepreneurs, is they do feel the guilt of not contributing regularly and substantially to 401ks and IRAs. And, you know, they go hang out with their friends and their friends are talking about what the markets are doing to their retirement accounts. And they're like, well, I just invested 12 grand in a mastermind, you know, and it's like, and they feel bad and they feel that guilt. But going into that, and like what you said, if you're starting to see those successes, I think auditing the tools and what's available to you, you know, are you in a situation, are you an associate and do you have retirement plans open to you there? Great. Understand the mechanics of those plans, understand and figure out what's my cash flow like, because ideally it would be hitting a certain savings amount ongoing, developing that habit and baseline. So as your income increases, this ratio stays the same and you're always saving at the level where you're succeeding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it goes into the next question, which I think just in general, people that have jobs or entrepreneurs, but I think the thing for me that I just see most of the time is the way to create wealth in any capacity. I always say wealth is a ratio. It's just like you could be wealthy and not make that much money because you don't spend that much money. But the problem that I see with most people, and it affects business owners even more, is as soon as this lifestyle creep, as soon as they make more, they spend more, they make more, they spend more, and they never have any spread. So maybe for the extra $1,000 a month, they got a nicer house or they got a better car or the kid went to camp or whatever. But at the end of the day, net, they're left with the same amount. And so how do you counsel people or think about like, actually, here's the question, because I go through this all the time. I'm very I would say disciplined. I'm very patient, but there's always in the back of my head of like, all right, at some point we've got to do something here. But and when do you know? How do you guide people on that?
Yeah, I think so. How I've seen it, at least more specifically over the last couple of years, is, well, I see it in a couple ways. I'm trying to think. There's a couple of answers that I have. The one that I see is that if I know people are on track, so one of the goals of financial independence is to accumulate assets to replicate your lifestyle without effort in the future. You know, it's kind of a wordy way to say that. And so my thought is, when you're talking about expanding and growing your lifestyle, figure out what's the minimal base that you want, be on track for those things, automate that front end, you know, in some way or capacity, or make sure that you're making significant progress to those. So then, you know, whatever shows up in your account that's extra outside of that, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. And the reason why I kind of paused for a second is I was thinking of some specific examples where I had a clinic owner. Now this person is in the dental field, and they came and they were there with their wife and they're talking, and they're always save first and worry about fun and all the other stuff later. And then they're in a situation where they propose some things and say, well, you're 100% on track to replicate X number of dollars a month when you're 55. You're already on track for that. And anything you've proposed to me isn't going to challenge that. So then do whatever the hell you want with the rest.
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens when people give themselves permission to go and do some things, especially if it's experiential or it's related to housing improvements, it gives them a degree of satisfaction to where now you've kind of scratched that itch, and then they're ready to get back after it and push to the next level. Sometimes if they're too restrictive, it creates almost a resentment for the effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Because it's something, personally, my wife and I have conversations about all the time. Me being the entrepreneur, it's like, all right, we're almost there and all that. And I'm guarding against that, right? Of the resentment that she's like, all right, but when? She sees it and she gets it, but she's human, right? And I understand it too. Dive a little deeper into, you said, because I think this is an important point that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. the accumulating assets to, I believe you use the term like replicating lifestyle. And so, somebody came to me once and said, yeah, their goal, they did some mastermind program. The goal is to get the practice to $1 million, sell it and live off of that. And I said, well, are they okay with living off of 40 grand a year? And the guy was like, what do you mean? And they didn't understand that. So talk about when you say that you need to accumulate assets to replicate your lifestyle. What does that actually mean?
Yeah. So what it comes down to is things come down to cash flow. What kind of income can your assets turn off or spin off? And so like the equation that you used just really roughly was that 4% rule. Hey, you got $1 million. What can we pull out of that if we invested it? What could we pull out of that without depleting it? And you're right, the math runs about 40 grand. But then what is it factoring in? Do you have bigger trips that you want to go on? Do you have bigger experiences? Do you have legacy goals? Are you going to have grandchildren? Are you going to want to pay for their education? Are you set up for a health event? One of the things that statistically depletes people's assets the quickest are unaccounted for health events. So you just have to start thinking differently. So when I was talking about the assets, yeah, growing a practice to $1 million is great. But then it's like, well, it's up to $1 million. What else could we do with it? I almost think of that asset of a business when you're at that kind of point as how else can I leverage that, right? Can you then partner with somebody? Can you then bring people on? Can you create more scale? And so you're right. Traditionally, people would sprint to a single number, but think about it in other ways. Like, cool, the practice is up to $1 million. Now is that enough cash flow to where I can pay for it? Well, then what can we go start acquiring real estate with some of this extra money that we don't need? Yeah. Do we start, are we maxing out the accounts that are important to us? I think a lot of it is spending time worried less about the specific number and more about what you're trying to create for yourself, and then reverse engineering it, because then you can start attaching numbers to it. Because that $1 million that you talked about, Justin, if somebody says that, and then you and I are sitting there talking to them for whatever reason, we're in some sort of a mastermind interview. I'm like, well, that's great. You want to do that, but do you want to own another property? Do you want a vacation house? Well, how the hell are you going to support yourself and have this other property and do immediately the plan blows up when you go after that type of a number.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, most of my clients are getting started or still in that growth phase, are really trying to grow. Maybe they're doing $250,000, $300,000, $350,000 in revenue. Some are just getting started below that, but I have a few that are higher than that. So I have one specifically who's doing like PT chiropractic, like 1.2 million in revenue. It's a good business. It's a great business. I just had a call with him today, and we were talking about like, what now? Like, what do I do? And I said to him, I was like, listen, you're in a position now where I think you have two things to factor in. Number one, the next growth move is what you like to do and what's going to create the most cash income for you, right? Investment wise, essentially. And so, because the decision was, do I open up a second location? Do I expand the current location? Do I go and invest in real estate? And I said, you've kind of given yourself the chance. You've given yourself the freedom to sort of make that choice of where it goes. And I think the term that I heard once that I really do like, and I try to get people thinking more globally with it, is the term of like Justin Inc., Will Inc. Like, it's not Justin the Chiro, right? It's not Will the financial services guy. It's like Justin as a corporation, what's best for that, right? That might mean real estate portfolio. That might mean multiple practices. That might mean expanding the one that we're in. It might mean the stock market. But which one is going to give us the best return and to give us the lifestyle that we want?
Yeah, and then it's not always, and then you're right. And what you were kind of hinting around is another term that I hear people talk about, which is we talk about ROI, return on investment. The other thing that once you're starting to see success that's worth considering, that a lot of people don't get into the position to, but successful business owners do, is return on hassle. Like, cool, if these things are able to return us and we're able to achieve all our financial goals, which one is actually going to become a hassle? So like, I know some people, I remember talking to this guy, he runs, it's kind of landscaping and pest control. It's a massive business. And I remember sitting in a meeting with him and this money manager and hearing him talk. And the guy says, hey, you're nice enough. I really appreciate the time. You seem smart. Nothing you've said has given me more confidence in you than confidence in myself. I know almost to the day, or if I took the same money that I put with you, if I put it into my business, I know almost to the day when I'm going to get a 20% return. And if I asked you when I'm going to get a 20% return from you, you can't tell me. He goes, so that stresses me out. So I'm going to choose to invest in this business. Other people don't want to be in the business anymore when they get to that point, and they say, please take care of this for me. So that's where having these conversations and getting to know yourself, which is why doing the types of things that you're doing, coaching people to grow their base, will allow them to make more specific and directed decisions. Because I think it's easy in traditional advice to say, max out your 401k, max out, your simple IRA, max out, whatever plans that you put in. But like, is that answering the question? Because going back to Justin Inc., which I really like, is more of like, what do I actually want to be? Not what do I want,
Yeah, and I like the idea of that too, and in terms of thinking more broadly. As business owners, there's a lot that sucks, but one of the nice things is that the possibilities truly are endless. Like there isn't just a 401k plan and that's your retirement. And that's always the thing that's excited me. And it sounds like, you're in that same boat. So let me ask you this. You deal with, I think you have the benefit of dealing with many different professionals, similar to me in my world, where I can sort of pick and choose so much advice because I see so much of it. What are 3 mistakes that you see from people in healthcare with their finances?
I think one is not establishing a line of credit for their business soon enough. They're they've been taught to be so debt averse that they create bottlenecks in their growth by not figuring out how to create available cash quickly, even if they don't necessarily have the liquidity. I think that's one thing that I see because they just don't know how to use the instrument. I think number 2 is they're too quick to give away equity. I see very quickly they're trying to identify something like, I want to make this person my business partner. You just got to remember, the second you give equity to somebody else, they now benefit off of everything they help with and everything that you did before. And getting rid of them if you go different directions is problematic. Number 3, I think owners don't pay attention to the operating agreements, and also they don't play out in their minds what happens if something happens. Meaning like, what happens if you're not there? Then what happens to your family? They don't create they don't solve for the what ifs, the GoFundMe events, if you will, because they're so worried about, well, now I need to start investing. I mean, if you grow a big enough pot of money, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. But if something happens and you can't work or you die prematurely, then what happens to the other people you care for?
Yeah. I like it. Regarding the partners, because I have partners in the business and sort of some of the different entities. And one of the things I caution specifically new grads with is I'm going to partner with my friend. And the thing that I tell them with partners is like, listen, man, a partnership has to work with 2 people that have usually opposing skill sets. So both of you are graduating, have never owned a business, don't know how to treat patients, and just getting going with it. So neither of you have any skill set. And when we're going to partner, because we're scared, and being scared is not a good reason to partner. Like you have to bring something to the table. And I think, and again, I'm just getting into it as well. Like I'm sort of green in that way too. But even quickly, I could see the partners have to. So my partners that I bring in are typically ones that are really good practitioners that want to run their practice, that want to own a business, but potentially don't want to build the back end infrastructure, hiring all the BS that I'm good at, so to speak. And so the partnerships generally work. But if I wanted to treat patients all day and they want to treat patients all day, the partnership is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly right. You're talking about the organization chart, being able to figure out and to delegate and to make sure that because like you said, you need certain things to have a successful business. And you need strong check marks in all those boxes.
Right. Yeah. And the partnership thing, can get hairy. I think, like I said, people mostly do it out of fear. And it's just a great perspective. It's just they're scared to do it on their own. And it's one of those things where it's like in a relationship, sometimes it's better to be apart to see if you're good to come back together. People I've had this conversation with 2 individuals. I remember they were still in school, very motivated, great people. And they're like, oh, we're going to partner. And I was like, you know what? Why don't you work separately for about 18 months? And then if at that point you're still like, yeah, let's do this, then maybe we'll figure it out. But today, I would venture. And again, that's the thing too. And just going into the weeds a little bit, if you want to share an office and like split rent, fine. But like, let's not get married yet.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's, date a little bit before you enter into marriage, which is ultimately what it is when you go into business with somebody.
For sure. Absolutely. All right. So then we covered the student loans. We covered investing. We covered a little bit about partnerships, biggest mistakes. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you need to shout from the rooftops for Chiro's healthcare practitioners, either in practice, students, or whatever?
Yeah, I think the big thing is is continue to work with good mentors. I think is critical. I think getting comfortable and having a good student loan plan. I know we covered it, and so I won't go into any more details, but have something that you can explain to other people. Just because if you're able to explain it to other people, it means you understand it yourself. So I think that's important. I think making sure and working on developing open lines of communication with your partner or spouse or whoever in that situation who's helping you with money decisions, because you don't know if they're sitting on their fears and they're not sharing it with you. And the help from home of a supportive partner can make all the difference in the business. And, even in that, and then I say making sure that you're reviewing that you've got the right legal work in place, because nothing holds up a business quicker than a little bit of litigation that you have to deal with.
Right. So just to when you say legal work, give us some thoughts on it. Like where do they need to go? What do they need to do?
I think making sure that you have an operating agreement in place. I think at least having written out like a process of, hey, somebody shows up and sues us for X. All right. What's our first recourse? What's the process? Who do we contact? What insurances do we have? I think we're just kind of game planning through some of those basic things. So you basically have your own operating manual as an owner for should those problems arise.
Got it.
I just think it's just helpful because like you've seen it when people get really stressed out, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your systems. Yeah. So if you don't have a system in place for that, it gets problematic.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, let's end the podcast on a positive note since we're talking about getting sued. Give us a bright outlook on the economy or like what you see.
What I'll say is that rain or shine, a good clinician can grow a business that will sustain anybody and everybody they care for without question. And the beauty of that, it doesn't matter whether stocks are up, whether stocks are down. People end up in pain and they need somebody who can provide a solution. And if you're able to put together systems and processes to be able to do that for people and repeat that year over year, you're not going to have to worry about cash. It's just going to be awesome.
That's awesome. I think it's great advice. And we saw it during 2020. A lot of private equity was coming for healthcare because how stable it was. So you saw that probably just like everyone else did. Will, tell people where they can find you, where to follow you, how to reach out to you.
If anybody wants to chat, you can just go to financialphysio.com and that'll just get you on my call calendar, and then we can real-time dialogue. And then I'll just give you some contact information that you can attach to the episode.
Yep.
But that's probably the easiest way. Or just tap me on social media and I'll give you those handles.
What's your Instagram? Just so that, and I'll put in the handle, but just tell everyone what that is.
I think I have Financial Physio. I never use it for I don't put content on there.
Yep.
If people prefer to do social media, that wouldn't be a bad way to do it.
Got it. Yeah, we have a lot of Instagrammers in our crowd. So, Will, this was good. And I think, like I said, for the most part, people, the things they hate the most, they don't talk about. And finances is for sure one of them. So I'm happy to bring this to our audience. Even if they hate it, they need to listen to it. So I appreciate you being here. And I know our audience will get a lot of value out of it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you found this content valuable, here are 4 ways I can help you for free. 1, grab a copy of my free guide, the Rehab Chiropractors Checklist. You can get that at go.drjustinrabinowitz.com/guide. That's go.drjustinrabinowitz.com/guide. 2, go ahead and give me a follow on Instagram at Justin Rabinowitz, where I post business content. 3, subscribe to my weekly newsletter by sending me an email at coaching@strivetomove.com. And 4, leave us a 5-star review so we can gain access to more influential people and bring those lessons back to you.